Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest, absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southernappalachianherbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs. Hey y'all, welcome to the show. It is a beautiful spring day here in North Carolina, so I am doing this one outside. You may hear a bird or a breeze or some other bit of noise. I can't quite control any of that, but hopefully everything will come through clearly. I wanted to do this show today about a topic that I find just absolutely fascinating. You know, if you pick up any more recent herbal, book about herbs, you're not going to see mention of many ferns. But ferns are actually a huge part of herbal medicine that used to be used very commonly. Last week's show I was talking about spring foraging. I was talking about the bracken and the ostrich ferns, and those are great for fiddleheads, but these ferns have so many uses, it's just incredible. I mean, if you look at Dioscorides, in his Materia Medica, he had black maidenhair fern, black oak fern, bristle fern, brake fern, that would be bracken, bridal fern, eagle fern, female fern, hart's tongue fern, holly fern, lady fern, male fern. I mean, you're getting the idea here, aren't you? Polypody wall fern, shield fern, sweet fern, wall fern. I mean, this was a huge part of Greek medicine. And as you all know, I have a specific interest in what's called German folk medicine. And it's not, specific to the country of German, it's more the Germanic tradition. To me, it's just really interesting. After the fall of Rome, after the fall of the Roman Empire, Um, the stories, barbarians sacking the cities, burning the libraries. It was the monks that really smuggled and set those books out and saved the knowledge of Western civilization. A lot of people say the Irish saved Western civilization because so many of the monks took the books there and preserved the knowledge. But they also, a lot of them went up to Central Europe. And the first herbal that was written that I know of after the fall of the Roman Empire was written by Walafrid Strabo. Abbot Strabo was born around 800. That's 800 AD. I mean, that's a long time ago. He um, he was a brilliant theologian. He became tutor to the son of the Emperor Charlemagne. He was very influential in the church. He had a pretty short life, actually. But in his final years, he retired to a monastery in Germany, and he was German by birth. And he wrote a book called Hortulus. Now, Hortulus, that means garden in Latin, is just a really neat book. It was all poems about his little garden, the herbs, mostly medicinal herbs that grew in his garden, and he listed the uses, the virtues of each of these herbs. And he was a funny guy, he was a smart guy. I mean, there's humor in the book you wouldn't expect for a book written over 1,200 years ago. I mean, it's a really great book if you can get a copy of it. That really began um, Yeah, I wouldn't say began, but that's really some of our first evidence of the monastic medical tradition. Even before then, the Pope had been so impressed by I think especially the Benedictines, how they could use herbs for healing people, that by decree, he said all the monasteries, and I believe the nunneries as well, had to have what were called physic gardens. They had to have herb gardens, and they had to have hospitals open to the public. So for the entire Middle Ages, a long period of time that most people don't think a whole lot about in terms of great achievements, um, in thought and everything, but really herbal medicine was flourishing. The monastic medical tradition was just huge. Um, Next in that list comes St. Hildegard von Bingen. Now, I've done a whole show on her. St. Hildegard was absolutely amazing. Um, she received messages from what she called the voice of the living light. She was a visionary. She spoke with God. She spoke with angels. They taught her herbal medicine. I mean, not only did she write some of the most incredible theological works of all time, she was named a doctor of the church. That is the highest honor. She wrote two books on herbal medicine, and her herbal medicine was as spiritual as it was practical medical advice. She was so well thought of that the Pope and the bishops asked her to travel throughout Central Europe, preaching and teaching in all the Catholic churches. People came to her from all over the world from her knowledge. I mean, I've said before, she had the wisdom of Solomon. I mean, she was not trained in herbal medicine and horticulture, but she knew more about it than anyone on earth. She was particularly fond of a few ferns, and in her book Physica, she mentions the hart's tongue fern. Now, you have to remember her view of medicine is very different than our modern view. It has as much to do with spiritual causes and um, putting the person in harmony with nature and with God as it does with curing a disease. Her favorite was probably the hart's tongue fern. Hart's tongue fern, she wrote, is hot and is very effective for the liver, lungs, and painful intestines. Therefore, take hart's tongue fern and boil it in wine. Add pure honey and bring it to a boil once again. Then pulverize pepper and twice as much cinnamon and bring it with the above mentioned wine to a boil once again. Strain it through a cloth so as to make a clear drink. Drink it often before and after meals. It benefits the liver, purges the lungs, heals aching intestines, and carries away internal decay and mucus. Also, the hart's tongue fern in the hot sun, dry the hart's tongue in the hot sun or gently on a hot tile and pulverize it. Lick the powder in your hand with your tongue often, having either eaten or not. It checks the pain in the head and the chest and other aches which settle in your body. A person who is intensely and suddenly weak from any pain should immediately drink some of this powder in warm wine. Of ferns in general, she says that fern is hot and dry and has a little bit of juice in it. It holds within itself great power. Now listen to this. This is a doctor of the church. Okay, this is not some new age Johnny come lately, Jill come lately. I suppose we should say this was written in the 1100s. It holds within itself great power, namely such power that the devil flees from it. And it even has certain energy, which is like the power of the sun. As the sun lights up dark places, so the fern chases away apparitions and evil spirits disdain it. The place where it grows, the devil rarely practices his deceptions. Magic and incantations of demons, as well as diabolic words and other phantasms, avoid a person who carries a fern with him. I'm not exactly sure what she's talking about, but we know, I mean, this may sound all woohoo and whatever, but I don't care if you're the strongest Bible believing Protestant. If you read the Old Testament and really the New Testament, it speaks of magicians, it speaks of people talking with the dead, it speaks of all kinds of demonic possessions. This is a saint saying ferns actually can protect against that. Why not? God gives us many things, some for health, some for spiritual reasons. Fern is also effective as the following medicines. One who is vergiftet. That's an old German term which basically means anything from rheumatism to any painful paralysis and stiffness. It's an inflammatory condition, I guess we could say. One who is vergitchtigat should take fern when it is green and cook it in water. He should frequently bathe in that water, and the gitch will cease. In summer, when it is green, put the leaves over your eyes often while you sleep. It will purify your eyes and take away their fogginess. One who is deaf so that he does not hear should tie fern seed in a little cloth and place it often in his ear. He should be careful that it does not enter the head through the ear, and he will again receive his hearing. And one who is vergitchtigat in his tongue so that he cannot speak should place fern seed on his tongue, and the gitch in his tongue will cease, and he will again speak. Indeed, if a person who is forgetful and ignorant holds fern seed in his hand, his memory will return and he will receive understanding. Thus, he who is incomprehensible will become intelligible. Now, that's quite a claim, and I think this definitely bears some inspection here. I mean, we need to find out about this stuff. So, German folk medicine progressed through the years, and I've spoken before about Father Nape. Father Nape was a great herbalist in the 1800s. One of his, I guess you'd say, students, people he inspired, was another priest named Father Johann Kunzel. Father Kunzel wrote a classic book in 1930, 1931, somewhere around there. Really didn't make it to the Western world because, well, about the time his book came out, we were having wars with Germany, and people wouldn't even be seen with a book written in German, and backlash going on at that time. So, needless to say, his book didn't make it very well into the Western world. But his wonderful book, which was incredibly popular in Central Europe, in it he lists the fern. He lists several uses for ferns, but this is interesting. And this may give us a little insight on why St. Hildegard thought it has such power. If we think of, in her 1100s, Middle Ages way of thinking, sicknesses weren't caused by germs, sicknesses weren't caused by inflammation, sicknesses were caused in their way of thinking oftentimes by evil spirits. Um, you know, if you've ever had bad pain, you can pretty much figure where somebody got that idea. So the fern, according to Father Kunzel, he says, what is the best bed for people suffering from cramps, aching limbs, rheumatism, rheumatic toothache, rheumatic headache? It's a sack filled with dried fern. Fern draws these things out and gives relief to those who suffer. In addition, fleas and bed bugs flee miles and miles away from such a bed. Nothing can induce them to return as long as a bag filled with ferns is there. Saddlers would make a good business by stuffing mattresses with dried ferns instead of seaweed. All, even the smallest variety of fern, used internally, but only in small doses and mixed with 3/4 wine, drive away worms. The large fern root can weigh up to 2 kilos and has an astonishing, almost wonderful effect against all the ailments mentioned above. Foot baths with this root, used for 8 to 14 days, cure the most severe convulsions and gouty ailments. Full baths made from this root are even more effective. The large fern root, boiled in vinegar and rubbed in, drives away rheumatic stiffness, etc. Thus, the despised fern, which is used like straw, is a great glorious gift from God for suffering mankind. Ferns in the shoes relieve tiredness and provide warm feet. In case of rheumatism, lumbago, aching limbs, a sudden stiffness, one immediately fetches a right bundle of green fern leaves and puts it to the painful area. At the beginning, the pain increases, but then it disappears. In the winter, a tincture of fern is used for rubbing it in. It is made by chopping green leaves, placing them in a glass, pouring alcohol over them until the fern is covered, sealing well and exposing it to the sun or warmth for 4 to 6 days. Then the spirit, which has now become fern tincture, is poured off. Eucalyptus oil is just as good. When hearing loss comes from a cold draft and is therefore rheumatic, one should stuff the pillow with green fern leaves and sleep on it. It is even better to put fern seeds into a very small sack and stuff it in your ears. The seeds can be seen on the lower side of the fern leaves in rows of black spots, and they fall as a fine dust when ripe. So we're talking like spores, basically. Um, the best of the ferns is the male fern. That's Aspidium felix, called Foliagata by the Romans and Felice by the Italians. Farmers call it feather fern or ostrich fern. Male fern thrives in moist areas and rich soil and is often grown in gardens. Forest moss, especially the staghorn moss, Lycopodium, which produces meter-long stems, has the same power against cramps and spasmodic legs as the fern root. The decoction can be used repeatedly for foot baths. The staghorn moth decoction drives away all kinds of lice and vermin from people and cattle. A bundle of staghorn moss at the foot of the bed pulls cramps out of the legs, probably because this plant contains radium. That's interesting. I did not know that. Radium. Well, you can see there's a long history of use of these ferns. And I mean, obviously, a whole lot of ferns. My research has shown that there are no less than 68 different ferns that have documented medicinal herbal value. Obviously, I can't get into 68 ferns in a, in a short program like this, so I'm just going to kind of hit the highlights. Turning to um, a modern herbal, Miss Greaves, a modern herbal that was written, I believe, around 1937. Yeah, 1935, 37. We'll start with the male fern or male shield fern, which, as far back as the time of Theophrastus and Dioscorides, was known as a valuable vermifuge and has its use in modern times widely revived. Now, vermifuge means it gets rid of worms and parasites. She quotes Gerard, an earlier British herbalist, who quoted Gerard and Culpeper a couple of times. They were herbalists in the 1500s, well, early 1600s too. Gerard writes, the roots of the male fern, being taken in the weight of half an ounce, driveth forth long flatworms, as Dioscorides writeth, having drunk in mead and honeyed water, and more effectually if it be given with 2 scruples or 2/3 a dram of scammony or black hellebore, and they that will use it must first eat garlic. Okay, Old English can be very hard to read and very hard to understand. Basically, he's saying that, all right, hellebore is a purgative. We don't use it much now because it can be very toxic. Essentially, what he was saying was to drink this decoction or tincture of fern root, eat garlic, and then have a powerful laxative, and it would expel the worms. And a lot of these ferns have vermifuge or worm-killing properties. Then talks about, let's see, well, we'll skip a couple and go to the lady fern. The lady fern's uses are the same as in the male fern, but it has a less powerful action. Always good to know. Spleenwort is a very interesting one. Spleenwort has been used since Greek times to reduce inflammation of the spleen. Um, Says it was also called milk waste because it was said to cure disorders of the milk or spleen and was much recommended by the ancients. Black spleenwort is another one, can be used pretty much the same way. Wall rue is one she mentions. That's Splenium rudimariara. She says it was considered good for coughs and ruptures in children. One of its old name was tintwort, which refers as a specific cure for the rickets, once known as the taint. So it was taintwort in Old English. Also used to prevent hair from falling out. Now, a lot of these ferns, not only do they have the vermifuge properties, but they are specifically used for coughs and congestions, what they call pectoral complaints, and for hair loss, which is very interesting. I mean, people have been looking for a cure for baldness for as long as mankind's had hair, I suppose. And the ferns are apparently fairly effective, especially several of them. Culpeper says of the walroo, a decoction being drunk helps those that are troubled with coughs, shortness of breath, yellow jaundice, diseases of the spleen, stoppings of the urine, and help to break the stone in the kidneys. It cleanses the lungs by rectifying the blood, causes a good color in the whole body. The herb, boiled in oil of chamomile, dissolves knots, allays swelling, and dries up moist ulcers. A lye made thereof is singularly good use to cleanse the head from the scurf and from dry and running sores. Scurf, as best I can tell, is basically like psoriatic dandruff. It stays the shedding or falling of the hair and causes it to grow thick, fair, and well colored. For which purpose, boil it in wine, putting some of the small seed thereinto, and afterwards some oil. She talks about the maidenhair fern, common maidenhair. There's also a maidenhair fern called true maidenhair, which is Adiantum capillus veneris. Now, this one was very widely used. Dioscorides mentioned it. Its chief use has been a remedy in pectoral complaints. That's coughs, that's congestions, that's pleurisy, even bronchitis or pneumonia. A pleasant syrup is made from it in France from the frond and its rhizomes, and is a favorite medicine in pulmonary catarrhs, that's congestion. It is flavored with orange flowers and acts as a demulcent with slightly stimulating effects. Honey is often added to the syrup. Culpepper says this and all the other maidenhairs are a good remedy for coughs, asthmas, pleurisy, etc., on account of it being a gentle diuretic, and also is good in jaundice, gravel, and other impurities of the kidneys. All maidenhairs should be used green and in conjunction with other ingredients because their virtues are weak. Gerard writes of it, it consumeth and wasteth away the king's evil, that's gout, by the way, and other hard swellings, and it maketh the hair of the head and beard to grow that is fallen or pulled out. She lists hart's tongue. I told you what St. Hildegard said about hart's tongue. The older physicians esteemed it a very valuable medicine, and Galen gave it in an infusion for diarrhea and dysentery, for which its astringent quality made it a very useful remedy. In country districts, especially in Wales and the Highlands, an ointment is made from its fronds for burns, scalds, and for piles, and it's taken internally for Bright's disease. So, let's see. Culpeper said it's a good remedy for the liver, both to strengthen it when weak and ease it when afflicted. It is commended for hardness and stoppings of the spleen and liver and the heat of the stomach. Bracken, which is one of the we eat as fiddleheads. Culpeper said the roots being bruised and boiled in mead and honey water, drunk, kills both the broad and long worms in the body and abates swelling and hardness of the spleen. The leaves eaten purge the belly and expel choleric and waterish humors that trouble the stomach. He also said the roots bruised and boiled in oil or hog's grease make a profitable ointment to heal wounds and pricks that have gotten in the flesh. The powder used of them is good for foul ulcers and speeds healing. So, I mean, you can see there's so many and so many good uses. It's absolutely amazing we're not making more use of the ferns. I mean, they grow almost everywhere, and if you grow where they don't live, like if you're in a desert, you can grow them inside in pots. A common one that we see around here is the royal fern. Royal fern, she says, a decoction of the root is of good effect to cure jaundice when taken in the early stages, and for removing obstructions of the viscera. The roots may be made into an ointment for application on wounds, bruises, and dislocations. Um, the root, especially the heart and the middle of, this is according to Dodonaeus, an older herbalist, being stamped or taken with some kind of liquor is thought to be good for those that are wounded. Dry beaten and bruised, used for they that have fallen from some high place. And Culpeper says it has all the virtues of the former ferns, and is much more effectual than they for inward and outward griefs, and is accounted singularly good for wounds, bruises, and the like. Decoction either drunk or boiled, or made into an ointment, or balsam or balm. Is singularly good against bruises, bones broken and out of joint, and gives much ease to colic and splenic diseases. Also good for ruptures and burstings. Recommended for lumbago. There's so many more. Adder's tongue, that's one you may see occasionally. That one often combined with horsetail. So it's another herb that has a lot of silica in it. Was used for wounds and bruises, bleeding at the mouth and nose. So you're getting the idea. And for this, really comprehensive, I told you we've got at least 68 or so of them here. Um, You can go to naturalmedicinalherbs.net or look in the book Plants for a Future. And it's going to give you more the, the modern uses, how we would look at them. Like, let's see if I can find a good one here. Well, maidenhair fern. Maidenhair fern has a long history of use, was the main ingredient in popular cough syrup. It's the fresh, dried leafy fronds are anti-dandruff, anti-tussive, that means stops a cough, astringent, demulsive, depurative, emetic, emmenagogue, emollient, uh, weakly expectorant, febrifuge, galaxagogue, laxative, pectoral, refrigerant, stimulant, sudorific, and tonic. That's a lot of uses for one herb. Also expels worms, uses a detoxicant in alcoholism. I mean, that's just amazing. Used as a poultice or crushed into the paste. Used put on the forehead to relieve headaches or the chest to relieve chest pain. Let's see if I can spot another one. Okay, hart's tongue fern. This one seems to be so interesting. According to them, this is Plants for Future. The fronds are astringent, cholagogue, diaphoretic, diuretic, expectorant, vulnerary. Used externally for the treatment of piles, burns, and scalds. Taken internally for the treatment of diarrhea, dysentery, gravelly deposits in the bladder, and removing obstructions from the liver and the spleen. Fronds are harvested during the summer and can be used for later use, dried and used for later use. So, you know, I think I've made my point. Ferns are super strong herbal medicine, and for some reason they've fallen out of favor and common practice. And, use caution in all of them. Some, they say, may have a bit of a carcinogen in there. Again, they've been used for thousands of years and, used reasonably and not in huge amounts are probably safe for most people, but you have to make that own decision. Um, Pregnant women should never take an herb without thoroughly investigating it first, and if possible, not at all when pregnant. Unless it's, oh, I don't know, raspberry leaf or something, which is specifically good for pregnant women. When again, not overdone. You can actually have too much raspberry leaf, believe it or not. So use some common sense and do your research, but uh, whether you're talking just practical medicinal use or getting into the more ancient spiritual beliefs of like Saint Hildegard, ferns are good to have around. They're fairly easy to grow, they're really pretty, and they're abundant. I mean, we could really be using these. In fact, a lady I spoke with the other day, we're working on a book together. She followed Father Kunzel's advice about the moss. She didn't have access to the ferns. She's way up in the Alps, and the ferns won't come out till spring. She found moss. Her husband suddenly had just a terrible, I guess you call it a muscle spasm. Could have been a pinched nerve. Could have been what they call lumbago. Anyway, they were planning on going out for a walk, and he couldn't even get out of the chair. She went and got some of that moss and put it on there. An hour later, he's up walking around, and they ended up driving and walking for over an hour. She said it really, really worked. So I think we're all looking for a cure for arthritis, back pain, any kind of joint pain, neck stiffness. Hey, grab a fern, slap it on there, like Father Kunzel said. Put some dried ferns in your bed, see what happens. As long as you're using them externally, they can't hurt. So anyway, y'all, have a good one. This is one of those where I guess I have to say, stay curious. Because if you just read the modern books, you're not going to see these ferns mentioned. You may see the male fern, you may see a maidenhair, but those 68 or 100 ferns that I've come across that have been used medicinally, you're not going to find. But you'll find them in the old books, and it makes so much sense when you realize ferns are some of the oldest plants on earth. I mean, there's a reason why, like, in old dinosaur movies, you see the dinosaurs walking around with the ferns. No, that's what was growing then. And giant asparagus plants, of all things. The coal we're burning now and the oil and gasoline in our cars is what's left of those ancient ferns that, rotted down and became petroleum. This is, all things on earth grew up together. And you got to think the more ancient plants have more potent, powerful healing properties. So anyway, it's just really interesting to me, and I hope y'all enjoyed it. Have a great week, y'all. Enjoy this wonderful spring weather, and look out for thunderstorms. We had one last night with hail and lightning and everything, so be safe. And it's almost Easter, so keep some hope in your heart. Have a good one. I'll see you next week. The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, for your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.